You may be familiar with the 1619 Project from the New York Times, which is basically fake news. They assert that the United States was created essentially in 1619, with the first black slave being brought to Virginia, and that everything after that was just made to try and keep slavery going. And that's just BS, complete BS. Now, it is true that this country had a lot of problems for a long time. But we are not defined by our failures or our worst days. We're defined by how far we've come, how good we've done, and how the founding fathers, for the most part, believed in freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those ideals have carried us forward to a point where we're now one of the most accepting countries in the world, if not the most tolerant and accepting. So much so that we bring in more immigrants than any other country, and we have relatively lax laws on the matter. And you even have politicians today advocating for just essentially open borders. So yeah, I think we're a very tolerant society. But the big news right now is about the 1776 Project. It is essentially black scholars coming together to reject this notion and writing what they think of the United States and the history of this country and how we've actually done a pretty good job. See, a lot of people don't know some history about this country, that many of the founding fathers found slavery to be detestable. They weren't perfect. They did a lot of things that by today's standards were horrifying and are horrifying. But of course they did. Every society did. It's called progress for a reason. The weirdest thing to me, especially considering my family history, is the rejection of progress from progressives. You'd think the New York Times would celebrate their own victories. If progressives truly want to create a more equitable society for all oppressed peoples, why wouldn't they celebrate their power and success? In my opinion, the goal is to always be a victim. That's why the more gains intersectional feminism makes, the more they try and reject this. And any woman who claims that they've been liberated or can succeed, they're told they're internalizing their misogyny. I'm going to read you the story about the 1776 Project, which counters this false narrative, and it's basically a pessimistic view of this country. America has done great things, and let me explain to you how I can simplify it with this Wikipedia page from a case in 1967 called Loving v. Virginia. I'm going to read you about the 1776 Project, but this means a lot to me and my family because a lot of people don't seem to realize that it was in this a current generation's lifetime today, people alive today who are not even that old, boomers, grew up in a period where it was illegal to marry someone of a different race if you were white. Essentially, non-whites and whites could not marry or have children. These were called anti-miscegenation laws or miscegenation laws. And it wasn't until the Supreme Court case in 1967 this was all shot down. Now, I'm going to let you in on another little bit of history. They talk about the flipping of the political parties and all that stuff in the Civil War. If I were to ask you which political party opposed these laws, who would you guess it was? If I were to ask you which political party tried to reinstate, did reinstate racial laws preventing race mixing, which political parties would you guess? Most of you online who are watching YouTube, you probably already know the answer. Now, you may be familiar with Wikipedia. Wikipedia is typically has a liberal bias, as they say. Let me show you something that I find kind of funny. Let me read you this passage, anti-miscegenation laws in the United States. I'll zoom in so it can be a little bigger. It's kind of hard to read. They say anti-miscegenation laws in the United States had been in place in certain states since colonial days. In the Reconstruction era in 1865, the black codes across the 7 states of the Lower South made intermarriage illegal. The new Republican legislatures in 6 states repealed the restrictive laws. That shouldn't be surprising to anybody who knows history. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and it was the Republicans who wanted to do away with slavery in the first place. After the Democrats returned to power, the restriction was reimposed. I find that so offensive. But I'm not going to play a game where I try and pretend that the Republicans and Democrats of way back when are the same as the parties are today. It's just not the case. Though they try to deny that this is reality, they have a bad history. Look, obviously today Democrats would not be in favor of this, so we've progressed. The reason I bring this up is that I wonder why they won't accept it. Democrats, you came from a bad past. You've now come to a better future. You're not perfect, nobody is, But shouldn't you be celebrating the change in your party? And shouldn't you be celebrating the victories of progress within your party as you now come to reject these racist laws? They're going to talk about how these laws were mainly held in the in the American South. In 1967, 16 states still retained anti-miscegenation laws, and it was the Loving v. Virginia case that went to the Supreme Court that officially made it. It's legal for people of different races to actually get married. Isn't that crazy? This is within our parents' lifetime. My family grew up when this was going on. So you want to talk about the horrifying, pasts. You want to talk about your 1619 project. I will never understand why the progressives won't just say, hey, guess what? We're winning. We've been winning, and we're going to keep that going. Perhaps it's because the people who actually hold liberty-minded views have abandoned that wing of the party. At least I think so. And we're seeing it more and more as more people walk away, as they say, from the Democratic Party, which used to be what they called liberals. Republicans were conservatives. I don't necessarily think it's true that the parties switched, but that's a whole contested thing I don't want to get into. The point is, the 1619 project, to me, is offensive. Now, look, I don't come from a family history that had anything to do with slavery. My understanding is both sides of my family emigrated here well after all of this stuff. I could be wrong, but I know for a fact on my mom's side of the family, they weren't here for any of this. So what I find offensive about it is not the history of slavery, but this negative view and this reductive view of race relations in this country, and how we've only recently come to a point in the past several decades, maybe 60, 70 years, where we actually got rid of crazy laws in many of these states. We did it. We're winning. Things are getting better, yet they want you to perpetually be a victim. And I absolutely refuse. I take pride in my family's history rejecting these laws that were bad and racist. So I'll absolutely claim my victory and say no. It was the founding fathers and their ideas, for all their faults, that paved the way that allowed my family to reject this. And miscegenation is still frowned upon in many parts of the world. America is awesome. Guess what? We are able to fight for our rights, and we've won them. So stop pretending like the founding fathers were bad people. They were some of the greatest people who ever lived, and they were, by our standards today, pretty bad in a lot of ways. But so was everyone else. They were the thought leaders who helped change these things. Of course, there were other great thought leaders in other countries who helped change things as well, and maybe led the charge before our founding fathers did. But I'm going to credit them with what they wrote and what they created that allowed me and my family to succeed and win where we did. Which brings me to the 1776 Project. The Washington Free Beacon writes, a group of predominantly African-American academics, journalists, entrepreneurs, and community activists on Friday launched one of the most significant challenges yet to the New York Times controversial 1619 Project, which is named for the year slaves arrived in Virginia and argues the United States was founded on racism. Bob Woodson, a leader in the African-American community who has spent his career fighting to stave off the cycle of poverty and crime, argued on Friday that the 1619 Project's message that life outcomes for African-Americans are shaped by the history of slavery and Jim Crow is a lethal narrative that perpetuates a culture of victimhood in the African-American community. During the launch of his new 1776 initiative, named for the year America was founded, Woodson said the new group would challenge those who assert America is forever defined by past failures. Let's be real. America has past failures, and it's only through the lens of victory do we realize where we were wrong. We made things a lot better, and now opportunity is here, and it's not perfect. You had things like blockbusting and redlining going well into the 1980s. So I'll be the first to say America has had problems with racism, but by today's standards, we are doing really, really well. We need to figure out how to solve these problems, but I don't think the answers are coming from today's modern left because they've all kind of lost the plot. Saying all white people are racist is not true. What about Bernie Sanders, who literally got arrested in the 60s fighting for civil rights? Spare me. What about the people of the North who fought to abolish slavery in the Civil War? Spare me. This country, it was the white people who weren't racist who actually are helping to expel the racism because, surprise, surprise, they're the majority. So it was only through the fact that many white people rejected this and those ideas prevailed that we were able to do away with the evils of racism. But guess what? Racism still exists, and it's substantially worse in other parts of the world. Do we have a long way to go? We do. Are we doing better than ever? You betcha. And I'm proud to say it, coming, with my family and everything they dealt with. I've never really had to experience the kind of legal hardships that my family did when they were while my family who's still alive. I don't have to. I don't have to worry about going into a place and dealing with signs or laws or fleeing states because we're winning. And that means there are good times ahead. Let's stop pretending like this country was evil and wrong. He goes on to say, there we go. While different academics and journalists have criticized the 1619 Project since its release last year, the 1776 Project represents one of the largest coordinated challenges to the New York Times narrative. It will focus its efforts on opposing the negative impact the 1619 story will have on future generations of African Americans. The 1776 Project will promote a series of essays and educational resources that provide an aspirational and inspirational alternative to the Times narrative. People are inspired to achieve when they're given victories that are possible, not always showering them with injuries to be avoided, Woodson said alongside partners at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. The fatalistic narrative of the 1619 Project, which is already taught in thousands of classrooms across the country, according to the partnering Pulitzer Center, deprives African Americans of the agency to improve their lives, Woodson said. This garbage that is coming down from the scholars and writers from 1619 is most hypocritical because they don't live in communities that are suffering. They are advocating something they don't have to pay the penalty for. Glenn Lowry, a professor of economics at Brown University and a 1776 contributor, echoed Woodson on the damaging impact the 1619 Project message would have on future generations. The idea that the specter of slavery still determines the character of life among African Americans is an affront to me, Lowry said at the Friday event. We have shown and will continue to show that we are not merely baubles at the end of a historical string being pushed this way and that by forces beyond our control. I believe in America and I believe in black people, Lowry added. Something tells me when I read that document that the 1619 Project authors don't. They don't believe in America. And I'm sorry to have to report, I get the impression they don't believe in black people. The 1619 Project offers a very crippling message to our children, said Dr. Carol Swain, a former professor of political science at Princeton and Vanderbilt University. I was spared from having that message brought to me. And I believe that if I'd been exposed to that, if I'd internalized that negative message, I don't believe that I would have been able to do the things I have done in life. I'm going to give you a sad dose of reality. It's true that in many circumstances, racism, sexism, bigotry can hold you back. But if you dwell on those things and believe that you can't succeed because of them, you won't. If somebody has a failure, let's say they're not good at running and they want to be a runner, and they think the only reason they're not being chosen to compete in certain events is because of immutable characteristics, they won't be able to solve the problem. But if they realize that it's possible the fault lies somewhere else, they can seek it out and solve this. You need to reflect upon yourself. So the sad reality in this world is that everybody is dealt a hand of cards, and some people get dealt really bad hands. But if you play right, you can still win. Poker, for example, somebody could be dealt a really awful hand in poker. They can still win by playing right, being smart, bluffing, or whatever they do, pressuring. There are ways to win. That's the point of the game. So while there may be real hardships, the best you can do is focus on improving yourself and figuring out what you need to do to navigate this system. But I've seen it too many times. People being told, you will never succeed because of this. This thing will hold you back. And I say, I don't care. I'm going to navigate this system. I'm going to sail these waters. As the saying goes, you can't change the direction of the wind, but you can adjust your sails. So no matter what someone tells me, I will say no. And for those that are fans of My Hero Academia, now I'm going to get some anime, as the main character said, whatever the future is, if it's a bad one, punch through it, smash it, determine your own fate. If there are people around you who try to hold you back for things you can't change, get rid of those people. You can find a way. Let's read a little bit more. The 1619 Project was launched last summer to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the first arrival of African slaves to the American colonies. It aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of our national narrative, and to show that different aspects of contemporary American life, from mass incarceration to rush hour traffic, are derived from America's history of slavery. That's just so insane. When you look back at your ancestry, you'll notice you got two parents. Those two parents have four parents. Those four parents have, you get the point. It becomes exponential. And you go back in your family history, and all of a sudden you have this massive map of all of these things that have come down to a single point. You. And of course, you can follow back just your father's 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 father in one straight line and hyper-focus on the one guy 300 years ago who did one thing. But you would be completely removing the contributions of all of the other people who contributed to your existence. And that's true for our country as well. There are so many people who contributed to the foundation and formation of this country. And of course, if you want to navigate one line, you can point to impacts that slavery had on basically everything, but you'd be ignoring literally everything else. You'd also be ignoring that in today's day and age, we actually cherish, we have people who fought to end slavery. We have heroes of all races, and they're the people we look back on and celebrate. These are people who rejected these notions. So to say that today this country is founded on this idea or that's going to hold you back is an affront to what we've actually done in this country and to the people who fought so hard for freedom and liberty for all people, regardless of your race, gender, identity, national origin, religion, whatever. We won. But these people want to create a narrative that we didn't, that no matter what we do, we can never succeed. And that's defeatism. And I refuse to accept that. I think we're going to do better. Now, for whatever reason, the modern iteration of the left we have today are people who absolutely need to be victims. And so they latch on to this and they refuse to let it go. They try and claim that literally everything and everyone is racist. And that's what we're seeing with the New York Times, because this mentality is inside our news media. They won't tell you the truth, and they won't be optimistic about it either. They want you to feel bad and they want you to bow. They want you to bend the knee and give up power because you are bad. This is weird religious dogmatic nonsense. They say that the intersectional feminists are a non-theistic religion. Some professors have said that, and it's true. What they're presenting here is essentially, it's akin to original sin, something you can never get rid of unless you bow and apologize. Something interesting happened, though, in the 2016 election. Don't ask me why. Maybe because Hillary Clinton was an awful candidate. About 10 million people switched from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party to vote for Trump. And with that exodus and the walk away movement, you end up with a bunch of people who used to be liberal thought leaders no longer having anything to do with the Democratic Party and these institutions. And now you can see them falling down this weird path of dogmatic cultism that no one wants to be a part of. I think today, a lot of people who think like I do are probably not paying attention, not active, not aware. We call them the exhausted majority, traditional liberals. They're not paying attention. So they might read this and say, huh. But I look to the UK and the segment I did earlier today on this channel, and I see the crushing defeat of the Labour Party. If our mainstream institutions and the Democratic Party keep going down this path, it's only a matter of time before people like me, people who think the way I do and fit into a political space that I do, who aren't paying attention, start paying attention and walk away themselves. Because I'll tell you what, when I tell my friends some of the things these people believe, they don't believe me. They say there's no way they're saying that. And I'll show them the videos and I'll say, you need to start paying attention, because the people driving the bus that you're on are headed so far left, they're going off the cliff. And it's time to start paying attention. I'm not saying the Republicans are the right choice. I'm saying you need to wake up and speak up for once. We've done great things in this country, and the best is still ahead of us. I hope. We got a Mars mission. We got, what is it? The Artemis project. Go to the moon, build a moon base, go to Mars. I'm extremely excited for the successes of our country. So long as we have people who actually believe in our successes, and we start pushing away these people who want to claim that the only thing we have is our failures. That's absolutely not true. We're defined by our successes. And I will absolutely hold up the success of the United States and show it off to everyone around the world and say, this is why we're better. And the proof is in the pudding, because everybody wants to come here. So if you think this country is horrifying, if you think we're defined by our failures and we're full of racist bigots, I ask you why all of these non-white people want to immigrate to this country and join us. Because we've done better than anyone else, and we've made a better world where you are free to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. YouTube.com/Timcast. It's a different channel. I will see you then.